help. But just, I think we can all say that we're grateful for you coming and spending some time with us tonight. Thank you.
Thanks very much. We are
And
open.
do stay on, by the way, do stay on because there's going to be a fun discussion about product owners and how they are toddlers. You'll probably be able to relate to that. So,
Sounds great. I will drop my contact information in the chat. Again, we are a
yep.
resource. Please use us. We are here. Feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Delaney.
Oh, really quick, sorry. I'm seeing the links. We're going to post the link tree on LinkedIn and some social media sites. For anybody who's not in attendance who would like access, is this on your website? And maybe I missed that.
Good
We are
question.
going to post it. We are going to post it on our website and everywhere, Lisa.
So it'll be accessible to the public, and then you can share it even through our LinkedIn or something. You could share the LinkedIn post, and that would share that as well.
Perfect.
Thank you for asking, Lisa.
This one I made especially for you all. So it's not posted on our website. I made it for tonight.
Woohoo! Oh, I love feeling special. I know Reedy does too. So thank you so much. So now I'd love to turn it over to Zeta Star, who wanted to give a talk tonight. Our own Rachael Hendershott, who wants to tell us all about why product owners are like toddlers. And this is coming from a recovering product owner, as I understand it. So if we have any product owners on here, Dhruva, like don't be offended by why you might be like a toddler sometimes. So Rachael, take it away, my dear. The floor is yours.
Before Dhruva, do we switch over on the recording? Okay, good.
All right, so if you'd like to go ahead and get a fresh juice box before we get started here, it'll help as we go through this. So, all right. So our presentation tonight, as Vinny just said, I'm going to be talking about why product owners are basically toddlers. So let's see, I'm sorry, just opened up at the top of my screen. There we go. All right, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, and can I
Yes,
just
we can see
say
your
for everybody on the call, if you want to see the people talking and the presentation and you can't, there's a layout button, and then you can flip your layout, and then you can see the people talking and the presentation at once.
All right. So let's get started then. So just a quick introduction of myself. I am a mother, a wife, a veteran, an adventurer, and also a business owner. What I do is, as Vinny said, I have been a product owner. I've been working in product for the last 7 years. I have recently moved over to a solutions designer role at Chase here in Columbus. I'm originally from Canton, Ohio. But I have been living here in Columbus for the last 2 years. 17 December 1988 to present. And why? Why do I do what I do, and what do I do? I like to solve problems with technology, and I like helping people find success while pursuing their passions, whether that be just strictly at work or outside of work as well, such as being part of Zettabytes here. Also, if you have any questions, please feel free to, just cut me off. That's fine. I probably won't cry, but I like to have an interactive session and kind of go back and forth. So if you have anything that you'd like to talk about more in depth, please go ahead and just interrupt me. So, assuming that everyone here has at least been in contact with a product owner at some point, I did want to briefly talk about what is a product owner. So the actual definition is, someone who develops a product and curates the backlog and makes a roadmap and make sure that everybody stays on task, is the liaison or the visible person to the business from the technology side. But what we really are at heart, we're really a toddler masquerading as a professional who is knowledgeable both about the business that they're working in and technology. So with that shared understanding.
Wait, hold on. So
Yes.
I'm imagining,
Yeah.
okay, I'm imagining what we call a three-nager. A three-nager is a toddler. It's a 3-year-old who acts like a teenager, But in this case, it's not that they think they know everything. They really are knowledgeable about both business and technology.
They really are, and that's why they're the ones who are ultimately responsible for leading both sections of the organization on the right path to ensure that that they're building the right thing at the right time and it's solving the right problem.
Is this like an actual goal, or are most product owners exactly these? I mean, these are their responsibilities. That doesn't, you know, it's the other side, right? Who they are really.
Yeah, who they are really.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
All right. So the reason that product owners are basically toddlers is because all we do is ask why. That's all we do. And if you've ever worked with a product owner, you've probably noticed that we all ask a lot of questions. But this is actually a legitimate use of asking questions to drive down into the actual problem that's trying to be solved. And this technique is known as the 5 whys. So when we're presented with a problem from the business, the problem that we're given isn't necessarily what needs to be solved, and we're trying to ensure that we're solving, excuse me, the right problem. So the 5 why techniques, this is used usually at the beginning of a discovery phase to understand, like I said, what is it that we are trying to solve. The complexity of the problem will really dictate how many times we ask why. It doesn't always have to be 5. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more, depending on how in depth we have to go to get these answers. Solutioning shouldn't start prior to finding out that we're actually solving the right problem. Managers and executives, they know what the problems are, but this is really a technique that's best used with those who are working in the software every day. They're the ones who are going to understand the work that they do the best, and they're going to understand their pain points because they live it every day. We want to make sure that this is used in the right way and that we're not using this to assign blame, but we're using this to figure out what the problem really is. If we use this to assign blame, you're going to get a lot of pushback the next time you try to solve a problem for these same people. And they're not going to want to work with you because the last time they helped you get to the root problem, you did nothing to actually help them, if that makes sense. And this,
So
yeah.
Rachel, these people that you're mentioning, they are within the organization, right? You're not talking about the consumers who are just going to run away. Like I was almost there today with my bank because it took me an hour to activate a debit card. An hour.
Yeah. Well, and if
So,
that bank and if that bank had passionate product owners and they wanted to solve your problem, they could do outreach, they could do surveys, they could do
okay.
beta groups, right? So you really wouldn't kind of do this in a survey, but if you had, let's say, we'll put a beta group together of super users or knowledgeable users or tenured users or whatever it happens to be, then you could use this. But typically, what you said is right. This would only really be used if you were building software internally or you had that kind of relationship with customers that you'd be able to sit down and talk to them for an hour plus.
Right.
Yep. And it's actually, kind of seamlessly goes into my next point is this may not be appropriate for all scenarios. And there are other things that should be done at the same time. So an example, just kind of high level, to ensure that you're solving the right problem, right? We said the right problem with the right solution at the right time. So if we look at this graphic here, we'll see that the problem that was originally presented to us was that the user ran a red light. So the first thing the product owner is going to do is start to find out, okay, is the problem that you ran a red light, or was there actually a root cause that forced you to run that red light or caused you to run that red light? And I'm probably not going to sit here and go, but why? But why? But why? Even if I, was a toddler, right? I'm not going to ask why in that way. I'm going to use other types of questions that kind of boil down to the why to get the users to answer the question so that we can move down to figure out the root cause. So in this instance, they ran the red light. So Was there a reason that you ran the red light? Well, I was late for work. Why were you late for work? Or what caused you to be late for work? Woke up late. Were you out late partying last night? Was there a reason that you woke up late? No, just my alarm didn't work. Okay. Did you forget to set your alarm? Was there a reason that your alarm didn't work? Well, the batteries were dead. Okay, so now we've actually taken this user down their journey, their own user journey, to figure out what is actually the reason that they ran the red light. So they told us that the battery's dead. Well, why'd you let the batteries die? Oh, well, I forgot to check it. Okay, so here's the root cause. Here's what's the real problem that we need to solve. So then the solutioning can begin. So this is where we can start to say, okay, well, every 6 months when you spring forward or fall back and change your clocks and you go and you check your smoke alarms and your carbon monoxide detectors and all those other things that you do, just go ahead and check those batteries in your alarm clock to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Or catch up to this century and go ahead and use your cell phone. That would probably be easier. Either way, as you can see, the original problem that was brought to us was that somebody ran a red light, and then the actual cause of this had to do with the alarm clock and not the red light at all. So, any questions about why product owners ask why a million times? No,
I see
very
the
clear?
the 5 why journey, that I see. I know that on Route 33, there's the smart corridor, and with the city of Dublin, they actually are studying why people are running through red lights. And the way they are trying to use that data is basically have your car beep a lot if you're trying to go through the red light, like, because most of the things in reality are happening because people are checking their cell phone. And so they have actually put up cameras, like several cameras in the city of Dublin at each intersection to exactly study how people go through red lights and if they're going to run over pedestrian crossings, folks out there. So this is a legit, 5 why exercise for them in that
Mm-hmm.
sense, so.
Yeah, absolutely. Great.
Cool.
So the next reason that product owners are basically like toddlers is when we're not asking why, we're probably saying no.
For sure. You
So
can't have that.
reason
You can't have that.
why? Why can't no, but why can't I have the no? That's mine. All right.
And
So
Rachel, is it and I
Mhm.
want it right now? Because I've heard that.
Yes.
That's the stakeholders.
Yep.
They're the ones who want it right now, regardless. And mine's just like, no, I don't want to.
You
I
can't
can't
have that.
Can't make me. Can't make me. Um, so we're saying no. So, but why are we saying no? So there's a lot of reasons why we might say no. And a lot of that boils down to prioritization. So priorities, they come from everywhere. The priorities of the management or the executive team may not be the same priorities of the users. So product owners have to make sure that we're balancing that. We got to make sure that the people who are actually paying us are happy, but we do also have to make sure that those that we're serving, those that we're building the software for, are happy as well. We have a direct impact on their quality of life while they are at work. So we have to be cognizant of that and ensure that we're balancing the needs of management and the executives with the end users. The priority should be influenced by all of these different levels of users. So the actual end users, the managers, executives, legal and compliance, risk, the development team, maybe they have work that needs to be done that doesn't actually correlate to a true improvement or end user experience, but it might be important to ensure that we are implementing something new to make sure we don't have like tech debt later on. But ultimately, this is up to the product owner because, as we said before, we're just toddlers masquerading as professionals, but we do know the business inside and out, as well as technology and the software that we are building. We are subject matter experts in both of those domains. So we are there to bridge that gap and lead both sides to ensure that the right problem is being solved in the right way at the right time. And when we are communicating our prioritization, we're using roadmaps, sprints, release notes, etc. There's a multitude of ways that we can communicate what it is that we're building and why to our end users or to our stakeholders.
That's a great point. And if I can just add in, is that okay? That I think there was a time, I want to say like 3 or 4, I call it BC, before COVID, actually. But there was a time, BC, where there were, a lot of compliance changes that I kept seeing because laws kept changing and there kept, especially different states have different laws. And so things may need to be changed for one state or another. But I'll tell you, since COVID, and all through 2021, whatever that year was, and at the end with Log4j, it's been a lot of like security type stuff. There's been so much hacking going on, so much cybercrime that we've had to almost, push some new functionality type work in deference to security because it's such a huge issue.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
so as an end user, right? I mean, I mentioned that I spent an hour today trying to activate a debit card, and it was all related to like 10 different levels of security. I had to produce my company's, tax ID, my social security number, my, website. I mean, it was like, you gotta be kidding me. You're asking me for so many things. Just activate my darn card, right? So I can understand that conversation, but I'm just curious, product owners in an organization where they typically live, in the hierarchy of people, do you think in practice, Rachel, as a recovering product owner, some of this so-called prioritizations, right? I mean, because you have conflicting priorities, how much does the one who shouts the loudest in an organization gets what they want? And also, have you seen that in the name of compliance, much more is read into than the actual law, the compliance?
yeah. Well, I'll answer that backwards. So
Okay.
I work at a bank, right? So I see
Right.
compliance and risk and what is it? Can't think of the word right now, but
Legal.
regulatory. Yeah,
Right.
I see that take precedence all of the time. We have built workflows that are going to impact 300 users, but these are for the billionaire clients, and there's a regulatory requirement that says, oh, we got to be able to report out something, right? So that might take the spot of building something that's going to impact 50,000 users because of that regulatory requirement, right? So yeah, I have seen that quite a bit. Previous to working at a bank, I worked in an alternative to health insurance company. So same thing when it comes to health insurance. Any highly regulated industry is going to have that issue. I don't necessarily want to call it a problem because it is what it is, but it is an issue that has to be addressed and understood. Now, the other question of do I see that the loudest person gets what they want? Yes and no. A lot of times it's not necessarily the loudest, but it's just the one that carries the biggest bat. Whoever's got the biggest title wins usually. But when all things are equal, title and bat size, then yeah, it does kind of come down to who's yelling the loudest and who can present their case the best.
Right.
So, yeah. Any other questions before I keep going on why we're telling you no? All right.
Keep
fantastic.
saying no.
No? Okay, perfect. No. So a lot of times we're not just saying no, but we're saying not now. No is really more used along the lines of what you're asking isn't feasible. It's not going to give you the expected outcome. It's only going to impact a small amount of people. Those kinds of reasons. Usually, what we're saying is not right now. It's not the priority right now. Yes, it's a good idea. Usually, people don't bring us bad ideas. It gets like snuffed out earlier before it gets to us. But then once we're saying no and not now, we have to look into cost and ROI and the requirements and stipulations that are passed down by our leadership about how we look at cost versus ROI, because you might have something that is a large cost. And if it has a small ROI, let's say a security implementation, right? ROI would be that it doesn't really affect your users, it doesn't affect your development team, but there is going to be the ROI of ensuring that you are actually compliant with that new security requirement. But it is a high cost. We look at all those different things. We look at sometimes how many headcount is this saving versus the cost of implementing this. So if it's going to take us a year to implement and it's only going to save one full-time employee of work, okay, well, that doesn't balance out. So that's when we might say no as well. So the idea might be good, but just it's not feasible or doesn't make sense to actually do. And then
So how much do you take into account as a product owner into the equation about I'm talking about end users, right? The constraints of where you work. So again, not to belabor, the activation thing, the solution that this bank came up with is that I had to show up at a branch because for some reason they decided that the ID that I was using was a non-owner user ID, although it's me and I'm the owner, but my other ID was of a company that no longer exists, but I'm seen as an owner in their database. So whatever this was, it couldn't be fixed. I had to show up in person at the branch. And if this were a bank that was completely online, that is not the solution that they would come up with, So
yeah,
I'm just putting it out there that what kind of constraints as a product owner do we put in the ROI equation that we take it for granted, based on where we work, what those constraints are, right?
yeah. So I think that when we're looking at your scenario as a product owner and completely objectively saying, okay, but you're one person, you're my one customer, and the likelihood of your use case occurring to a large number of my customers is probably not likely. So while I understand your frustrations and I can empathize, I don't know that it would be a great ROI for us to necessarily go and solve your problem.
Right, but then it comes back like, why wasn't this use case even thought about, right? I mean, most of the time, here's another example. On the same day, 2 of our cars, the battery died. So I called Nationwide Insurance Road Service because that's where we had the insurance. They had set up an app by which it was, so I put in the first car, to get roadside service to somebody come and jump my car.
And you couldn't put in the second.
And the second one, when I put it in, it would cancel out the first one. So because it was all tied to my one cell phone number. And this went on, and it took me 4 hours to finally figure out what the hell was going on because it would cancel out the previous one. This was just a nightmare. It took 6 hours for somebody to come and jumpstart at least one of our cars. So, those are the types of things, like how could nobody think about that there's a duplicate scenario here? You cannot put a unique identifier with a cell phone number.
Well, I think that would then go to like the 80-20 rule. Go ahead, Lisa. Sorry.
No, there's a lot of other folks at play. I guess at what point does a product owner own this? I'm thinking
Right, exactly.
Oh, for sure.
Of BAs, I'm thinking of all these other pieces.
Exactly. Right.
how do they connect, and where does this all siphon in?
Yeah. So I
Great
think that
question,
really
Lisa.
Yeah, I think that really depends on your organization and how it's structured. I've worked with organizations because in my brain, QA should have caught that, right? Like I, as the product owner, am probably not going to think of every edge case. But if it is my job to literally break something, then I should have been the one to come up with that scenario where I have a user that has two issues at the same time. How do they submit both cars? And I don't necessarily think that that's super far-fetched. That wouldn't be something that I'd say, oh, that's such an edge case that we wouldn't have tested it or we wouldn't have thought of it. But when we think of the 80-20 rule as well, we're thinking about, 80% of the users are going to go down this path, and then the other 20% are probably going to go down something very similar. And then because we have 103% in this equation, the other 3% are going to go on this really weird journey where they had one business and then a second business and they used the same thing. And then now our database is confused because we probably didn't prioritize that story from development, which was let me do some data cleanup because our front end people didn't understand why data cleanup was important, right?
Absolutely.
So there's
Absolutely.
so many different facets in that kind of, how do we prioritize this? How do we ensure that this doesn't happen? How do we keep the customer happy, right? But also then how do we see the forest except for beside the trees, right? We need to
Right.
ensure that we're looking at this also from the grand scheme of things and getting things into the customer's hand, getting functionality out there as quickly as possible. Concept of fail fast. It's another concept that we
Right.
look at
Right.
within agile processes, right? So I want to be agile, I want to be quick, I want to be able to get something out to you, and if it fails, okay, now I'm going to go fix it. I'm not going to sit back and spend 3 months coming up with every single scenario that could possibly happen
Correct.
before I push that software out to the end users.
And I think so this brings back to, Lisa's question. I mean, the feedback loop is
Oh
fundamentally important, right?
yeah. Yeah. I forget all of your question, but if I'm remembering correctly, we're looking at, this is another reason why we're like toddlers, squirrel. So we're looking at how many hands did this go through? It went through potentially the end users, the product owner, solution architects, development, QAs, BAs, any kind of audit that we'd have to go through, right? Like there are multitudes of people that this goes through, and if something like this doesn't get caught, that seems pretty fundamental. I should be able to submit 2 requests at the same time. Things happen. I might have hit one car with the other, right? I mean, that happens. So something like that seems fundamental because there are so many touch points to a story when it gets developed. The individual who it's currently assigned to should feel empowered to speak up and say, hey, I think this is wrong, or hey, I think we forgot something here. And the product owner may say, yeah, you're right. Let me go ahead and we're going to go ahead and add that into this story, or depending on the status of the story, nobody yell at me for adding scope. Or we're going to go ahead and create a new story so that we can address this particular circumstance in another iteration or another sprint. So it kind of depends on your organization, because a lot of times developers aren't empowered to think. They aren't empowered to say, hey, this doesn't make sense, or I think we should take this into consideration. They're told, you do what the JIRA story says, and if there's an error message that's 2 sentences long and it doesn't have a period at the second end of the sentence,
Right.
don't put it in.
True.
I've seen that happen.
I relate. I've seen that happen too.
Yep. Like, please use some common sense here, guys. It's 2 sentences, should be a period. But that's not every organization, and my experience has been the larger the organization gets, the more they want to ensure that the right people are making the right decisions, and the people who are doing the work have enough information that they're going to be successful with what they deliver.
So in that sense, how is a Scrum Master that different from a product owner?
Yeah. So Scrum Masters really should be autonomous, right? You have your product leadership, you have your development leadership, and then Scrum Masters kind of just need to be out and about and not really beholden to either path, right? Because they should be able to remove roadblocks. They should be able to ensure what is being done is the right thing. But they're not going to be necessarily involved with making the prioritization calls. And they're not necessarily going to be involved in the development or delivery of that. But they are just another set of eyes, another pair of hands to ensure that what's being delivered is actually the right solution for the right problem at the right time.
Cool.
So.
Very cool.
All right. And then the last reason, or the last thing about why we say no, and it's more of, it's not really a reason, but it's just something else that we have to take into consideration, is this is all very personal, right? As we talked about with the end users and with prioritization, we have to remember that your decisions are going to impact their daily activities, their daily life, whether it's easy or whether it's harder. We have to remember that the person who brought us the problem is probably very passionate, or they wouldn't have spent the time to put something together to bring that problem to us. We have to remember that the developers who are doing the work, they are very much like artists, right? Like they're creating something, they're building something.
No.
Yeah,
They're not
I want
artists.
to hear more. Wait, Rini, hold your horses. I want to hear more.
I don't know. I don't see them as artists. I see them as complete hacks. They just go to GitHub and get a freaking code. Yeah, sorry.
Stack Overflow developing. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And that might be the case. They may not care, but you know, I worked with a guy at my last role. He and I are very good friends now. But we fought for about 2 years. He was a lead developer and then ultimately a solution architect, and I was the BA and then the product owner and then ultimately ran the department. But he and I just fought tooth and nail for like 2 years, and our boss was just like, I don't know why you two can't, like, you get along. Like, you both love what you do. Like, why can't you work this out? And you know, it took many of like one-on-one conversations to find out, like, we're both very just passionate people. We loved what we do, and we had a hard time with saying, like, I see why your way is better. Another reason why product owners are like toddlers. But when he and I like came to this realization of like, okay, we just really both care. How do we work together better to ensure that we're actually delivering a product that we're both proud of? And we got it figured out, but sometimes it just takes that extra effort and that remembering that it's personal and that we're both producing something of meaning.
Absolutely.
All right. So last thing of why product owners are basically like toddlers. If we're not asking you why, if we're not telling you no, it's probably because we're crying that we didn't get our way. So reasons why your product owner is crying this week, there's a multitude of different reasons. But if you remember back to what we were just talking about, is it's probably because your product owner is very passionate and actually wants to deliver something that's of quality, that solves the problem. We get really upset when our UX or UI isn't implemented. When someone thinks that they have a better way to do something, even after we've created a whole mock-up and it's past this and it's past that and follows all the governances, and then someone's like, nah, you know, we get upset about that. When our
Does it really
prioritization is,
happen?
yes,
Like, but you're responsible for you're accountable for the UX.
yep, yeah,
Okay.
that happens all the time. When our prioritization is overruled, when that executive, that management team comes in and tells us like, no, like, we know that data cleanup's important. We know that, you know, you have commented out code and you want to remove it here. But we're not going to prioritize that, because I actually had a stakeholder told me, well, I don't care anything about that, so we're not going to do it. I'm like, but we are, because it's my role to say what is important, right? So going back to the very beginning, you know, the product owners were really expertise. We really have expertise in both the business and technology. So when our prioritization gets overruled, we're probably going to cry about it. if our
Yeah,
solution
I did make our lead developer cry once, so yes, I understand that.
I'm
Yeah.
honestly having a hard time seeing the distinction between like a product owner and account manager right now. This is very funny. This is working for me.
I'll send you the deck so you can just like strike through product owner and put in account manager and you can give this talk. Um, so, when we put a lot of effort, like going back to that artist thing, right? Like when we put a lot of effort into what we're presenting to be implemented or when we're trying to solve a problem and that doesn't get implemented, we probably cry about that. And then the last thing we cry about is when we build something, it's magnificent, it's the best thing that's ever been created, because that's all of my stuff. Then the users don't adopt it, or they don't adopt it in the way that we intended. That's probably another reason that your product owner is crying. So in summation here, you have your your all we do is ask why, unless we're telling you no. And if we don't get our way, we're going to cry about it. So for those reasons, that's why your product owner is basically a toddler. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
First of all, thank you. This was very informative, very hilarious, just like I knew it would be. So I'm very glad I'm here. I have a question going back to the toddlers always say no section.
Yes, I'm familiar. Go on.
So, one of the things you were mentioning was, sometimes you do have to draw that hard line and say no to your stakeholders. Sometimes you have to, you don't necessarily say no, but you say not now. And sometimes you do flat out say no. Now, I am like, my thing is, I want to take away wisdom from all of these different sessions in ways I can apply them in my regular life. And I know that there are moments I go through where it's easy for me to say no to people when they ask me to do something. And then there are times where there are some people, some stakeholders, let's say, I have in my life, where I need to say no to them and I'm having a hard time. Can you teach us your ways and how you say no to people and maintain those great relationships?
Yeah. So I think relationship building with the stakeholders is incredibly important before product owners. As soon as you lose that relationship or that trust that you have, you're gonna kind of fight an uphill battle from there on. One of the ways that I have found to be most effective with saying no is hard facts, hard data, showing them the numbers, particularly with numbers driven people. Um, you know, putting it on paper for them and saying, hey, look at this. Like, I'm going to spend 5 sprints of 2 developers and 4 QA time. That equals this amount of dollars. And you're going to save 0.0355 full-time employees at $17 an hour. Like, that's not going to be an effective use of the time. That's not going to be responsible for a responsible decision for this company. But what we can do is this other thing that you've asked us. We can look at this and see how better to maybe incorporate some of what you're asking into this. That's going to solve a little bit of both problems for you. I really look at it from a perspective of a give and take. I'm not giving you everything, but I can give you something that's going to make your life easier, that's going to make something better for you, or that's going to have a good benefit for you. And I find that a lot of stakeholders respond well to numbers because they're probably middle to upper management or executives, and that's easy to that speak their language.
The other thing that I would add, Rachel, and I don't
Mhm.
know if you use it, I mean, I've used a stakeholder analysis, essentially, basically figuring out in the conversation up front that you want, let's say, scale to 1 to 5, you want their commitment for whatever it is, right?
Mhm.
Absolute commitment, which is 5, and no commitment is 0. And you just want them to be somewhere between 2 and 3. You don't need a full commitment from some of these stakeholders, right? We spend enormous amount of time and effort in trying to get everybody, build that consensus, be committed. And that's where I think, going to your point, like I know I'm going to give them, some of it, but do I really need to give them full of it, full of whatever they've asked for?
Hmm.
But we don't need that commitment from them, right? But
Yeah.
we are influencing them to get to that range of 5 when we really need is 3.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
take them from 2 to 3. So your influencing tactics have to be slightly different depending on where you want them to be.
Yep. Yeah, depending on who I was working with too, that's why it's really important to know your stakeholders. If I was working with my CFO, it was all numbers. I'd probably even put it in Excel for him just to make him happy,
Right.
to make sure that he understood, right? But if I was working with the marketing person, right, I'm probably not going to put it in Excel, and I'm probably not going to be, I wouldn't say as data driven because marketing is still very much data, but
Right.
it would need to be a more colorful and visual conversation or presentation than it
Right.
would be just pure data on a spreadsheet. And then if if the stakeholders really being difficult, it never hurts to say, okay, I hear you. Just to triple check myself, I want to make sure that I'm making the best decision for everybody. Let me bring in my boss, or let me bring in another product owner, and just bring somebody else to the table and let them also say no, because sometimes when they hear it twice, it's like, oh, okay, maybe I am being unreasonable. Another thing you can do is MVP. I think we talked about this slightly, just shrinking the scope. Look at MVP, look at the minimal viable product. If I can take what you're asking for and I can cut that down into a smaller chunk, and even though I know it may not solve all of your problem, if it solves a significant amount of your problem, then that's easier to justify.
Yep.
Does that help? Awesome.
Dhruva?
Yeah, and so I just put in the chat, I was like, so you basically like what you're saying, how one person might want an Excel, a marketing person might want like a one pager that's like a little bit prettier, let's just say.
Yeah. Yep.
Like more aesthetically appealing, but it basically both of them tell a story, but in a different way, and it's a different type of story. And equating that to the toddlerhood, it would be like one person wants to watch like Daniel, Tiger, or Dora, while the other person wants to sing along on YouTube videos.
Right. So none of you are happy, and we're gonna watch Finding Nemo instead. You know.
We'll just keep swimming.
Right. You're gonna be, yeah. So then nobody's happy, right? Everybody's equally unhappy. That's a tactic we use with my nephews a lot. Like, hey, none of you are gonna get what you want, and you can all be miserable together. But yeah, I like the way you articulated this.
Didn't you say MVP? So the nephews don't get something? Some MVP?
They're still watching a movie. But yeah, I like the way you articulated with the tell the story in a format that they want to hear. And it's kind of like when you're talking to developers, right? You're not going to talk to them in the same way you're going to talk to stakeholders. You're not going to talk to QA in the same way you're going to talk to your Scrum Master, right? I mean, there are different ways to speak to everybody. And another thing that I like to say about product owners is we're translators, right? So I'm going to speak business, and then I'm going to come back to my development team, and I'm going to speak a nerd to them, right? I'm going to tell them that, hey guys, we need an API that's going to connect this, we need a new database table, right? I'm going to spit out all the technical jargon to say, I'd like to add a new field to capture this information when a user creates an account, right? But that may not be then when I go and I tell the solutions architect so they can go and design the solution to go to the development team.
Yeah, and this kind of echoes what Delaney was saying earlier about meeting people where they're at, like when she meets with certain groups, it might be a little bit more of a legal setting or something like that, whereas where she's meeting with another group, somebody who's very counteractive, to what their thought process is, she's going to kind of meet them at where they're at and kind of, go along a different route in how she's talking. So this, yeah, I love how all of this is kind of coming together in my head for me.
Yeah, awesome.
It's all about, at the end of the day, it's all about how we are influencing. I mean, Lisa and I being in I mean, Lisa full-time in business development, me part-time in business development. I mean, we do this all the time. You know, if you're evaluating somebody's profile in LinkedIn and that person is talking about how many dollars they have saved their previous company, you just know that what they are listening to is dollars. Whereas if a LinkedIn, senior exec is talking about how many people they have, sort of maintained, then you are basically looking at, how many they have mentored and all those things. That's a people person. So you're going to basically, whatever you're pitching to them, you're going to always bring in, how many people they have mentored, right? And what this will help with their relationship as opposed to actual money. So,
Yep.
yes,
Yeah, and even
we
words
have
like
to be savvy. So,
yeah, and even words like led versus manage, right?
right,
Did I lead an
exactly,
organization? Did I lead a team? Or did I manage people?
right.
Because those aren't necessarily the same thing. Sometimes managed is the correct term, and sometimes it's not.
And that's when you say no, right,
I'm not managing people ever.
right.
No.
David,
Facilitated
Robin,
like it.
Lydia, questions?
This was very interesting conversation. I'm just listening. Thank you, Rachel. And thank you for making it interactive. It was nice hearing
Yes,
different
awesome.
perspective. Yeah.
Thanks,
Great.
Lydia. David, Lisa, are you still there?
That Lisa's my Lisa.
Oh, that's Lisa's, your Lisa. I was wondering what that H
So
stood
here's the
for,
situation when I first
I've
logged on.
heard I've heard this presentation multiple times. So
So
it-
Lisa,
it's
I
good
thought your
practice.
video was mine, and I was like, I can't get my video to start, and I wasn't seeing the picture up here. This is what happened earlier. I'm like, what's going on here? I can't like.
No, so I was just
It's fine,
listening
okay.
for moral support.
Robin, how
Um,
are you doing?
I'm good. No, I'm good. Most of the things I was wondering, the question was answered already.
Awesome.
So
Vinny, any pitch to become a Zeta star?
Wait, I have a product question. So
Oh,
what if
okay.
there are multiple product owners on a team, like, and they're all at the same level? Do like you guys get like the bats out and have lightsaber fights, or like what happens there? Like, how do you decide what gets prioritized when you're at two strongly different opinions of it?
So if you're an agile purist, which is hilarious, it's an oxymoron right up there with military intelligence. There shouldn't be a fight because product owners should have resources aligned to their team, or that agile team should be, kind of autonomous in that way. So if you have multiple product owners for the same product that are utilizing the same resources, that would be an interesting scenario. And in which case, if you're on the same wavelength, I guess like if there's three, 2 out of 3. If there's not, then you go to your manager and let them decide.
There can be only one. So,
Right.
real quick plug for this. Become a Zeta Star on our website. It's a small fee to join our Slack workspace, as well as get exclusive offers to exclusive events here with us. You can see Rini in person and harass her with a martini in hand. Honestly, it's a great time every time you get to do it. Right now, also, for an example of what you get as a Zeta Star, you get a promo code for a discount to come to Level D&I's conference here in May, their Level Up conference. If you have not signed up or seen that yet, please let me know if you're interested, but it should be a really great time. But Zeta Stars get a little discount on that as well. Follow us on the socials. Keep up with us. Zettabytes.Today. We have an event every last Wednesday of every month. So looking forward to the next one. Those are all my questions.
Dhruva, Dhruva, can you add in text? I'm trying to do it, but somehow my thing disappeared on my computer. Can you add the link to the Zeta Star?
Already done.
Okay. And the other thing is, Vinny, not to, I wasn't, meaning I was just getting frustrated with what was going on my computer on this side. Chris mentioned, Chris Goins, who's not on the call. TransTech is an organization and they're having their annual conference actually, which starts tomorrow. It's on the Slack thread. Would somebody just put it on the chat?
I'll grab it real quick.
Robin. Okay, thank you.
Do you
Any
have
other
any? 'Cause I
questions,
haven't.
folks?
Well, Rachel, thank you so much for everything tonight. This was an awesome presentation. It did not disappoint. It was full of humor and laughs and really great info. So thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you all here soon. But see us, join us, become one of us. I cannot wait to meet all of you soon. Take care.
Here's to our sippy cups.
Here's to the sippy cups and juice boxes.
Yes.
Nice job, Rachel.
Thank you.
Great job, Rachel.
Great job,
Thank you.
Rachel. Thank you.
Mark you later.